So, good morning. The day before Easter Sunday. This is our Illumination of the Intention class. I wanted to introduce William, who you see on your screen, William Kaman, or Kaman. How do you say that, William? How do you say your last name?
Kaman.
Kaman. Good New York accent. William is in, where did you say? In Mexico itself, did you say?
In Pátzcuaro, Mexico.
Okay. William had just recently watched all of the previous recordings of the class on double speed to catch up. And he's an old student who I met some maybe 23 years ago in New York City when he was at Tibet Center. He's a longtime student, and so it's wonderful to have him added to our roster of students. So we're going to begin with some of the written prayers. Mary Ellen, would you like to put up the prayers? Thank you. So, taking refuge in generating bodhicitta. Sangye churang suki chognam la, changchu baru dagni kapsuchi, dagi chunyen gipe sognam ki, drola penche sangye drupa sho. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create through listening the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit migrating beings. The English says sentient beings, but the Tibetan says drola, which means to dedicate, for the benefit of migrators. Sangye chodang soke chognam la, changchu baru dagni kapsuchi, dagi chunyen gipe sognam ki, drola penche sangye drupa sho. And then a short mandala offering with a request. Saji poki chukshing meto tramri rablingji nidegen padi sangye shingdu mikte ulwargi drokunam dakshingla chuparsho. You can't quite see because unless I move my hands up because my name obscures. I'm holding this mudra, hand mudra, which is a representation of the mandala. Many of you know. I'll explain that in another time. O holy and perfect pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please send down a rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained, those to be subdued. Idam Guru Radna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Okay, thank you. So we're going to do a little meditation, begin with. So sit comfortably, relax your body. JC's putting his pillows in the right position. Good for you. And we're going to, first of all, relax your body, relax your mind. Remind yourself you don't have to think of anything else right now. Just notice your breathing without controlling it. Once you've noticed it, keep it in mind to the exclusion of everything else. And with a wisdom component, recognize when you're breathing in and breathing out. when you have time, it's good to do at least 21 respirations, counting them. I've just got up to maybe 13. Now bring your attention to your mental consciousness. Let go of attention to your breathing. You can recognize the mental consciousness indirectly, first of all, by recognizing its contents. A mental consciousness is an object that can be known by itself, but because it's very, very subtle, it's clear light by nature. It's not obvious. One has to infer its existence. It's almost like a hidden object. So we infer its existence by recognizing the thoughts, emotions, images, conversations, and so forth in our mind, and recognizing that they are arising within a media, the clear light natures, clear space-like nature of the mind. I say space-like because it's not space, it's actually consciousness and impermanent phenomena. But its conventional nature is such that it offers no resistance, no obstruction to the arisal of thoughts or to their absorption back into the consciousness, in the sense that, say, in a spring day, spring cloud, under the heat of the sun will just disappear back into the intermediate space. It's not as though the cloud, when it disappears, it went somewhere else. It just absorbs back into the air in that similar kind of way. When thoughts that are present are not attended to, they absorb back into the nature of the mind. So focus on that substratum of the mind, not on the objective thoughts, but on the subjective mind that's perceiving them. It has no shape or color. It's not like blue, like the daylight sky blue, not like that. It has no shape. It's known with your wisdom. We say the wisdom eye, or the gnosis eye. And it is our conventional Buddha nature, our developmental Buddha nature, as opposed to the emptiness of the mind, which is the non-abiding Buddha nature, the ultimate Buddha nature. Still, this conventional Buddha nature indicates, it's something we have with us all the time, that we can recognize and rejoice in its recognition, that we can develop any good thought. There's nothing that we cannot develop, any positive quality. There's no fault that cannot be removed from the mind. We have the potential to become an omniscient being, a Buddha. The fact that we can recognize that right now is due to the fact that this auspicious moment has occurred, this, what the Buddha called this life of leisure and endowment, which we created the karma for in many past lives. Human life, meeting the Dharma, when the Dharma teachings are still existing, so incredibly rare and meaningful, useful. We could achieve liberation after numberless lives in cyclic existence. We could become an arhat, or we could even become enlightened, even in as short a time as 3 years, due to the practices of highest Yoga Tantra. It would be incredibly wasteful, kind of dull-minded to not make use of this for a higher purpose, because it's so rare, it's so meaningful, it's so useful. We can create the causes of our own evolution, spiritual evolution, but taking to mind the Buddhist teachings on compassion and empathy, recognizing that all living beings are in exactly the same situation as myself, in wanting to be happy, wanting to be free of suffering. Most of them suffering much more than we suffer now in the hell realms, the hungry ghost realm, the animal realm, and even among humans, people plagued by sadness and sorrow in their lives. Taking them to mind, thinking that they are exactly equal to us in wanting to be happy, wanting to be free of suffering, recognizing they have all been our mother numberless times in the past, have been depthlessly kind. Every single one, even the stranger you meet on the street or the enemy you now perceive, conventionally labeled enemy at the moment, they have been our mother and our best friend numberless times in the past. To repay their kindness, thinking that with this life, I could use it to teach them, to give them resources, medicine, medical help, psychological help. But none of that would help in our present ability. None of that would help to their future lives. The only way that we can really repay their kindness is by giving them the Dharma wisdom to escape from cyclic existence. To do that, we ourselves have to achieve enlightenment so that we can perfectly, effortlessly, spontaneously, without effort, lead them without error to full enlightenment. In order to do that, we need accumulation of the two collections, the collection of merit and wisdom. In order to collect that, we need to know the methods, how to create merit, such as the 6 perfections, first 5 perfections in particular, and to accumulate the collection of wisdom, we need to perfect the perfection of wisdom, practice the perfection of wisdom, both of which are talked about in Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary to Chandrakirti's famous Madhyamaka Vatara, the topic of today's class. So think, I'm going to listen and participate, not simply to accumulate knowledge, but with the end aim in mind of achieving enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings. A bodhicitta motivation, creating powerful impetus, karma, even in listening, even if we forget that motivation in the interim during the class, by making a strong motivation to propel us into listening, we create very powerful accumulation of merit. Think, I'm going to participate in the class in order to become fully enlightened, a Buddha, for the sake of all sentient beings. That would be a wonderful motivation for our entire life, but particularly for this coming 2 hours. That's the reason I'm going to participate. And bring your attention back to the present. Good to see you. Amy Krantz is here also. Oh, interesting. Nice. Good to see Amy. Hi, Nadine, Rachel, Sumbash, Jennifer, Richard, Don, Mikhail. We said hello to others. Paul. We have a new member I mentioned at the beginning. Some of you who came later didn't know. William Kaman is an old Dharma student from Tibet Center in New York, who we met some 20 years ago, and he's listened to all of the previous recordings in preparation for his first class today. So good to see you. Okay, so any questions, observations from our last class, or any general Dharma questions you wanted to address before we begin? As a reminder, we're on pages 114, 115, just at that point in Triptan Jinpa's written text, printed text, and page 190 in Jeffrey Hopkins' translation in Compassion in Tibetan Buddhism. And if you're like Diana and others that have the digital edition, search for the phrase, as for the other forms of generosity, comma. You can find it in your digital edition, because the digital edition's pagination depends on how big type you have or how big a window you have. So there's no way of telling from that. Okay. Anyone question? Okay. Cool. So I'm going to begin from that point. So this is where we ended last time. Just the paragraph or two before that. But when attachment or clinging to true existence arises for these three elements of giving, we're talking about the emptiness of the three spheres, right? The donor, yourself as the giver, the recipient, and the gift. This is generally how it's mentioned. Sometimes in more, and if you think about it, also the act of giving, the action, is also empty of inherent existence. So sometimes we talk about jache lesum. Paul, JC, do you know that phrase? Jache chesum? Paul's
Yeah.
not. What does that mean, Paul?
What's usually chache is usually the object, the agent, and the activity, something like that. Remember correctly, but then it depends.
No.
I think it gets redefined sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is in the commentarial tradition, it's explained. Cha means the action.
Mm.
Let me see. I get back to gallery view here. Cha che means chepapo, the agent. And le means lesu chawa, that which is acted upon. Even though le sounds like the word for karma, that means action, it's actually in that abbreviation. It's chawa, chepapo, lesu chawa. So we talk about three things: the the action, the agent or actor, or let's say in this case, the donor, and that which is acted upon. So that which is acted upon has two elements. You're acting upon the gift that you're giving, and you're acting upon the recipient also with your action. in the same way, say, for instance, in, I think we talked about this before, right? Anyone remember? When you're cutting a tree, what's the agent of that action? Stephen, what's the agent of that?
Well, thank you, Venerable George. I think it's really interesting. So is it the person? Is it the axe that's being used to cut the tree?
Okay, so there are two.
Like how you go ahead.
Right. There are two agents. So there is the actor, the person, and there is the instrument, the axe or the saw. And the tree stump, or whatever you call it, the tree itself is the action, is the object that is acted upon. And the cutting is the action. So I just mentioned that to say that there are other ways of explaining the korsum. Korsum here generally is defined in terms of the six perfections, let's say in terms of generosity. The donor, let's say the agent, in other words, the gift or that which is given, you could say that's that from the chache lesum, that would be one of the two kinds of objects acted upon, and the recipient, which is also acted upon. So anyway, the text says, when attachment or clinging to the true existence arises for these three elements of giving, if one is fettered by clinging to true existence of the gift, receiver, and giver, that's how generally here it is given, this generosity is then said in the sutras to be mundane perfection. This is what we talked about last time, just giving a recapitulation. And then one more paragraph, or two more sentences here. Here is how what has been explained above can be practiced right now from this very moment. To give away your body to others and generate extraordinary joy in doing so, train first by taking it as an object of imaginative cultivation. So we talked about that in terms of doing Tonglen. Imagine, generally the general advice in doing imagine giving away your body. Not just to imagine a tiger coming or something eating your body, but imagine transforming your body into a wish-fulfilling gem, wish-fulfilling jewel, radiating out and coming before all sentient beings in the six realms, transforming into whatever they need, whether your body is used as food, whether your body is used as a servant, as a lover, as a friend. You can imagine, even now, to give away your body to others can mean giving away your body as a servant, not being abused, not feeling resentment if you're abused, and so forth. This is something we can begin to do now. My body belongs to all sentient beings. So then, this is where we're beginning. As for the other forms of generosity, such as giving material things, cultivate these in relation to the fields of giving, both to those of elevated status and to the lowly, on a regular basis, through such acts as offering even a simple thing like water. So, yeah, I don't have immediately how Jeffrey translated that, but so when we talk about elevated, what does he say? The higher fields of giving, both to those elevated status and to the lowly. So elevated status means to give to. No, so what do you think? What do you think, JC? What are elevated status?
I'm looking at. I'm sorry. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. Venerable George. I don't have Thupten Jinpa's translation, so going off of just
Jeffries.
Jeffries, lower and higher fields of giving.
Right.
I'm thinking about it. Other forms of by giving away anything from water on up to lower and higher fields of giving. Does it refer to the what were you calling it, the Lesujawa, the object, and for example, gift to the Sangha being of a particular like higher field of giving, a greater field of merit?
Yeah, so from the side of the object, the field to which you're giving, the highest would be the guru, equivalent to the Buddha, making offer, say, for instance, on our altars, even if we offer water and, bowls of water to the Buddha experiences them in great bliss. So you don't have to think that, he expects Coca-Cola or better quality water or something like this. You can offer to the Sangha, you can offer to those who are bodhisattvas, those who have ordination of any kinds or lay vows. Those are considered higher elevated status, arhats and so forth. You could even say compared to animals, humans are of elevated status because they can use their lives for the practice of Dharma. Lower objects could be people who do not necessarily use their lives for spiritual means, animals, pretas, and so forth, still accumulating great amount of merits. So we do offer water to the pretas and so forth with certain rituals. I think, Rachel, didn't you lead the ceremony when we were in Thupten Norbuling, when I was visiting there for offering to the pretas?
No.
Rachel, don't you remember?
Rachel.
You don't remember? You led the one of the pujas. You forgot.
Yeah,
Okay.
I sort of remember Venerable George. I sort of remember.
Yeah, okay, so it doesn't matter. So on a regular basis, you can offer every day. You can accumulate incredible amount of merit that way. That would be a bodhisattva's practice. If you set up your altar, some people even offer 100,000 water bowls over a period of time. That doesn't mean they have to do it all at one time. Might take you many months or a couple of years. Shankar, have you done that in preparation for your retreat? Did you do water bowl offerings?
Not yet, but it's in the works.
Okay, so you know what that's what's talked about. So then the text continues. On these occasions, be sure you are sustained by the wisdom realizing the imperceptibility, in other words, the non-objectification of the three spheres, the three elements of giving. Here he calls elements, so we say korsum. Usually we call it the other people translate it as the three elements. So you think, I myself who am offering, you meditate on the emptiness of yourself. You meditate on the emptiness of the water. You meditate on the emptiness of the Buddha or the recipient, to say the merit field or the guru or whatever. Mentally give away repeatedly your body, material resources, and the roots of virtue for the benefit of other sentient beings. Okay, that's clear, right? And then he begins a sentence with "and." Is that correct? Grammarians, you're not supposed to begin a sentence with "and." I would, but anyway. And contemplate how, comma, even if you do not give them away, they will perish nonetheless, and you will have to discard them anyway. Contemplate how, since you will have to give them up anyway, it would be better to mentally give them away beforehand. So Jeffrey translates that on page 190. You should consider that even if you don't give these away, if you do not give these away, they will disintegrate. What did Jinpa say? They will perish, yeah? They will disintegrate. They're changing moment by moment. They will perish. Thereby, you will have to lose them, and thus it would be better to give them first through your own thought, as if you were actually giving them. Make sense? Any questions? Jennifer, you okay? Making sense? Okay. Proceed as described in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, which Jinpa translates as the guide to the Bodhisattva's way. My body and my material resources and the roots of virtue of all three times, I will give these away without reserve to fulfill the wishes of beings. So that third line, without reserve, in Tibetan, we say, Pangpa mepar tangwar ja. I will give away. Tangwa means to give, like we say, tong. Tong is the past, tongwa, like tong len, giving and taking. Tangwar ja means I will give away. Pangpa mepa. Pangpa mepa, Jeffrey translates without regret. Jinpa translates as what? Without reserve. Pangpa means without any kind of attachment, not like giving with kind of like your mind kind of sticking to it. I give away these things, the roots of virtue of the three times, I give away without reserve to fulfill the wishes of all beings. And the succeeding verse, by giving away everything, one transcends sorrow, and my mind seeks this transcendence of sorrow. Since everything must be given up anyway, to give these to sentient beings is most excellent. So Jeffrey translates that on page 191, the second verse. Through giving away all, one passes beyond sorrow. That one passing beyond sorrow is a way of translating one achieves nirvana, right? And one's intention is to achieve nirvana. Similar to losing all at death, the best is to give to sentient beings now. Okay. So then, next section, the next outline, a conclusion stating the qualities of the ground. So this is the first ground, the first bhumi, the first mind generation, all synonymous, and this is called the joyous or perfect joy. The text continues, now to present briefly as described earlier the attributes of this ground of perfect joy as qualified by uncontaminated wisdom. Why is it qualified by uncontaminated wisdom? Anna, do you know why the first ground is qualified by uncontaminated wisdom?
I'm thinking because there's no attachment, there's no more of these afflictions. They've overcome the afflictions.
Oh, well, first ground is the first time you've realized emptiness directly, the first time you have uncontaminated wisdom, right? So it's qualified by uncontaminated wisdom. Contaminated wisdom would be what? Mikhail, what do you think? This perfect joy is qualified by uncontaminated wisdom.
Contaminated by ignorance or its imprints?
Yeah, contaminated. Generally, when we talked about contaminated and uncontaminated earlier in the text, we mentioned, in the Hinayana sense, the body is considered contaminated because it's the result of contaminated karma, thrown by contaminated karma. We talk about the contaminated body, the contaminated aggregates, and so forth. But contaminated and uncontaminated, from Prasangika point of view, come down to the fact that if you have a wisdom consciousness that directly realizes emptiness, that is uncontaminated. Anything else is contaminated by ignorance. So the text says, the root verse says, abiding perfectly in the bodhisattva's mind and endowed with light, beautifying the sublime ones, this ground of perfect joy is the water crystal gem. And Jimpa puts in parentheses there, brackets, the moon. So the water crystal gem is is sort of like, a name for the moon. It's not saying that it is a water crystal gem. It's just, it's sort of like a nickname for the moon, which dispels the darkness, which dispels all darkness and reigns victorious. Why doesn't it say this ground of perfect joy is the rabbit bearer? What is the rabbit bearer?
Oh,
Rubon Chen. JC,
well, that's also the moon.
that's another nickname of the moon, but that's nickname used in a particular circumstance. When you look at the moon, you seem to be able to see a rabbit in it. What do we say in the West? The man in the moon. Depends on your latitude and longitude how the moon is with respect to you, what it looks most like, maybe, and according to your culture and everything. But here, because the moon is cooling, it's sometimes with respect to that quality of the moon, not how it appears to you, but the fact that it's cooling and so forth, it's called the water crystal. So the commentary, Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary, so that verse itself, like here and in Jeffrey's text, they put the verses, but the karakas don't appear in Lama Tsongkhapa's Tibetan text. You have to sort of know from his commentary that he's commenting on the verse. So this ground of perfect joy, this joyous ground, is like the water crystal gem, the disk of the moon. It resembles the moon in three ways. It resides at a high point in that it abides perfectly in the mind of the bodhisattva on the first ground, who has attained the qualities of the ground described above. As such, it abides high up on the path, like the moon abides high up in the sky. Since the first ground is a facet of the mind of that bodhisattva, is a quality of that mind of the bodhisattva, one speaks of it abiding in it. This is like, for example, the eyes being located in the head. Okay, makes sense, right? Anyone have doubt about any of that? Nadine, are you following? Ah, good. Okay. 2, another reason why it resembles the moon, because the ultimate awakening mind of the first ground is endowed with the light of gnosis. Gnosis is the the Tibetan word yeshe, or in Sanskrit jnana, which is superior kind of wisdom, comes up in many cases. We talk about two kinds of wisdom, prajna and jnana, right? Or sherab and yeshe. Like Lama Yeshe is, yeshe, you could just translate it as wisdom, but it's a different kind of wisdom than just prajna generally, okay? Because the ultimate awakening mind of the first ground is endowed with the light of gnosis, or yeshe, in the mind of the sublime or excellent person, thereby beautifying them. you don't have to say him, beautifying them. It is like the moon, which makes its space, the skies, beautiful through its illumination. So this is just explaining the poetry of this verse, right? And another reason that the first ground is like the water crystal gem or the moon, also because the first ground reigns victorious over the objects abandoned on the path of seeing. The first ground reigns victorious over the objects abandoned on the path of seeing. It resembles the moon that dispels all aspects of thick or dense darkness. So again, poetry. Let me read what Jeffrey says for this third one. Also because the first ground abides overcoming what is unfavorable to it, that which is to be abandoned through the path of seeing. It is like the moon destroying all heavy darkness. So the first ground is destroyed or dispelled all darkness of mind. Toby, first grounder is dispelled all darkness of mind. I can't tell by your mudra. Does that mean yes, or what does that mean? You can't speak?
Oh, thank you, Venerable George. I'm sorry that
You're welcome. You're welcome.
I'm not completely familiar with your grounds as you delineate them. I do apologize.
You're not familiar with the grounds. First ground, second ground, third ground.
That is correct. As you delineate them, I'm not familiar with them. That is correct. Thank you.
So what are you familiar with? What grounds are you familiar with?
Coffee grounds.
I think that was Sean.
I'm happy with Toby grounds. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so you're, I'm not sure if you're joking or you're just what. So when we talk about the ground, the first ground is the first bhumi, the bodhisattva who has achieved the path of seeing is on the first ground. Okay, so has that first grounder, Richard, has the first grounder dispelled all darkness from the mind?
I believe that's what the text said, doesn't it? In Jeffrey's translation.
It says all
Just
heavy
like the moon
darkness.
destroying all heavy darkness.
Yeah, heavy darkness. Jimpa says dense darkness. There's a difference here. So the first grounder hasn't dispelled all darkness. He still has ignorance. When will he abandon ignorance, William?
Is it the seventh ground, eighth ground?
Well, yeah, William's agreeing, I guess. So
I think the eighth ground is what I would call the bodhisattva ground. And some even say you could be born into or go immediately to the eighth ground as a bodhisattva. The reason they compare Shravakas and particular Buddhas on the seventh ground, whatever you call the grounds, is because the accomplishments of Shravakas and particular Buddhas are comparable to bodhisattvas on the seventh ground, except for the bodhisattvas being faster and then being able to achieve the eighth ground. So I would say not until you actually cross 8, 9, 10 and become a Buddha at that point, there will be no darkness at all. But you're well on your way. You've entered the arena on the eighth ground.
When we're talking about darkness here, we're talking about timug, which is a kind of the synonym of ignorance. So until the eighth bhumi, one still has some darkness in the mind. So here is the important word is dense darkness, or as Jeffrey translates heavy darkness. So, you've eliminated on the first bhumi, you've eliminated the gross darkness from the mind, the gross ignorance. That's, the objects to be abandoned by the path of seeing are the intellectually formed afflictions, right? The intellectually formed delusions. Okay. So we're going to then, you're going to anticipate some cheer here. This concludes exposition of the first ground of the ultimate awakening mind from illuminating the intent and exposition of entering the middle way. So that's the first mind generation chapter, or the first bhumi. You can say the first ground. That's finished. Finally, that was the long ground, right? Okay. The main reason was because Lama Tsongkhapa elaborated in great detail about how the hearers and Shravat and solitary realizers necessarily realize emptiness. That in Madhyamaka Vatara is very, very brief, a couple stanzas, a couple of lines, a couple of paragraphs are there. Lama Tsongkhapa was, I think Doris had mentioned, it was like 11 classes or something like that talking about it. Okay, now, the second ground.
Venerable George?
Yes.
Quick question. When you're talking about gross ignorance, you're talking about the kleshas, right?
Well, ignorance is a klesha, is it not?
Yes, it is. But I'm asking if the gross ignorance, when you say the dense darkness,
Right.
The intellectually formed ignorance, you're talking about the kleshas, and then the other one is, of course, the imprints, right?
Right. Well,
Okay.
Here, the darkness is mainly referring to the mental factor ignorance. And and by the way, the view of the transitory collection. The other kleshas aren't generally called darkness, poetically. It's mainly referring to ignorance here, I think. So, and to the view of the transitory collection, they're of the same footing. So one has abandoned the intellectually formed ignorance and the intellectually formed view of the transitory collection when one has achieved the first ground. Now, the second ground is called the stainless, and both Hopkins and Jimpa translate it the same way, Dima Meba. The second ground is stainless. This has 5 sections. How morality is completely purified on this ground. The text doesn't say how. Jeffrey just says thorough pacification of ethics on the second ground. The Tibetan text says Sadir Sultim Yongsu Dakbar Tempa. It doesn't say how, but anyway. Morality is completely purified on this ground, the first ground. Second section, the praises of morality, or praises of ethics. Third, analogy for how the bodhisattva does not mix with forces opposing morality. The actual word is pe, which generally doesn't mean example. It means, doesn't mean analogy, it means example. Jeffrey says, example of non-mixture with what is not conducive to ethics, morality. Fourth, the divisions of the perfection of morality. And fifth, a conclusion stating the qualities of the ground. Okay, just to get that out of the way. So the first of those sections, morality is completely purified on this ground. This has itself has 4 parts. You can if you happen to have the written text or the Jimpa's text or the what's it called, the electronic version, you can actually go to the end and it has the whole outline down there in one section. So you can take a look at this. This has 4 parts, showing that morality is perfected on this ground, showing that on this basis, the qualities become completely purified. So Jeffrey translates that second one, through purification of features in dependence on ethics. Wait a second. Through purification in the second ground, the first 4 parts. Sublimity of ethics on the second ground. Jimpa said, morality is perfected on this ground. Thorough purification of features in dependence on ethics. Jimpa translates that, showing that on this basis, the qualities become completely purified, a little bit different. Third, how morality becomes superior compared to the first ground. And fourth, other causes that purify morality. Okay, so we're going to go to the first one. Morality is perfected on this ground. And now, again, both authors add in the karika, which is not in Lama Tsongkhapa's text, but they've both put it in. Jimpa translates, he is endowed with perfect morality and purity. Even in dreams, he shuns the stain of immorality. Or Jeffrey says, because his ethics are sublime, if we say non-gender, we say because their ethics are sublime and have pure qualities, they forsake the stains of faulty ethics even while they dream. Okay, so what is that? That's the root verse in Lama Tsongkhapa comments on that. The bodhisattva abiding on the second ground. Okay, so what's happened? They at the end of the first ground, there is a meditative equipoise. Let's say, what does that mean? They may be on the first ground for some period of time, collecting merit after they've realized emptiness directly, collecting wisdom. And then at a certain point in when they again go into meditative equipoise, it might be weeks, months, or years, or lives later, they enter into meditative equipoise with a sufficient accumulation of merit and wisdom to then make that leap to the second ground, where they start to eliminate the first of the innate afflictions. Okay, that's the entry into the second ground. So the bodhisattva abiding on the second ground, so they've risen from that, and from that period on, while they're on the second ground, they're abiding on the second ground, because they are endowed with perfect morality as well as the qualities of purity, not only during their waking period, not only while awake, but even in dreams, they shun the stain of immorality. What does he? So what he's saying. I'm talking about that chair. So both of them are translating pangbo, which we usually translate as abandon in different ways. Jeffrey says he forsakes the stain of faulty ethics. Jimpa says he shuns the stain of immorality. It's talking about, in a sense of getting rid of, so that it will no longer be there, abandoning. They are endowed with perfect morality as well as the qualities of purity, not only during the waking period, but even in their dreams. They shun or abandon the stain of immorality. That is, they remain untouched by it. So this, and the second ground, unlike the first ground, even in their dreams, they have no stain of immorality. So that has to be understood in a little more detail. We'll talk about this. So the text says, this includes not just the immorality of the root infractions and naturally reprehensible deeds. They also relinquish or abandoned the stains of immorality of violating rule-based precepts. So I'm going to ask Jennifer, what does that mean?
So I would guess that means that in one's dream state, first, well, they abandon sort of the 10 non-virtues, for instance, naturally reprehensible deeds, but also them, I guess, violating precepts, whatever precepts one has taken on top of that are beyond the 10 non-virtues.
Yeah. So say, for instance, even in their dreams, they wouldn't imagine murdering someone. I don't want to put anyone in an awkward position, but I probably have dreamed of doing something immoral in my dreams. But but the bodhisattva doesn't eat, things that are naturally immoral. But the bodhisattva, even in their dreams, they would not have that kind of dream, nor would they violate their precepts in their dreams. They wouldn't eat after midday, or they wouldn't touch another a member of the opposite sex with a lustful mind, and so forth.
So I could give you an example of why I'm not a bodhisattva. So I was taking the 8 Mahayana precepts and I fell asleep, and then I was like dreaming I had like champagne in my hand, and then I was like, oh,
Right.
okay. So
Right,
I'm like,
yeah.
I have a ways to go.
Well, you're not in the second bhumi yet. Yeah. Wow. Even if we were a bodhisattva, we would be an object of, even on the path of accumulation, we would be the object of incredible reverence and so forth. Mikhail, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm wondering the difference between root infractions and rule-based precepts. He's citing three things.
Includes not just the immorality of root infractions and naturally reprehensible deeds. So Jeffrey translates that this does not refer merely to faulty ethics in the sense of root infractions and transgressions of natural codes, but signifies that he or she has abandoned the stains of all faulty ethics, even those which are transgressions of formulated codes. Let me get to the right page here. Oops. Okay. So what do you think? What do you think that is?
I would say that root infractions are the main vows.
Well, the main vows, wouldn't the main vows be formulated? How did Jimpa translate it? Rule-based precepts, or as Jeffrey translates, even those which are transgressions of formulated codes. So let's go back. Mary Ellen, I'll answer your question first before I explain.
No, I was just going to say, isn't that the things that are not negative by or non-virtuous by nature? So, for example, drinking or dancing, but they are in the precepts.
Yeah. Right. So several questions. So let me explain first, then I'll get to both of you. So generally, when we talk about what we're talking about here is Rangshin gi kanamatawa and Chepe kanamatawa. Paul, do you know what kanamatawa means?
It usually just means something like unseemly, I think.
Yeah.
Kanamatowa, right? Something like that.
So some people translate not to be praised, blamable, unseemly. What it means are negative acts. In Sanskrit, it's vadya. So that's not something that's well known by a lot of people. So when we talk about the two kinds of negative actions, two kinds of kanamatua, rangshingi kanamatua means naturally negative actions. That means, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, abusive speech, divisive speech, even senseless, what do we call it? Idle gossip, senseless speech, covetousness, malice, wrong view. Those are all naturally kanamatua, naturally reprehensible, naturally, what does Jeffrey translate? Natural codes. This does not refer merely to faulty ethics in the sense of root infractions and transgressions of natural codes or natural reprehensible deeds. So those are the two kinds of things. So the other one is chepe kanamatua, means chepa means that which is formulated or made up, or the Buddha prescribed. Proscribed, I think Doris corrected my last time I said prescribed. You're prescribed medicine, but the Buddha proscribed certain things that you shouldn't do, right? So those are formulated codes or rule-based precepts. Shanka, you are first in line with a question there.
So the root infractions, reminds me, it seems to to me, reminds me of like the Samaya vows, right? So like, if you have the root, the 18 root downfalls, the bodhisattva downfalls, and, and then, taking it for offerings instead, that intended for the triple gem and so forth and so on, instead of the secondary downfalls, right? Or root tantric downfalls, like belittling the guru and so forth and so on, right?
So here, yeah, I think you've got the point here. So here it's talking about two things. We're not just talking about the pratimoksha vows. We're not just, let's say, the bodhisattva's transgressions of their root vows, I think, is what's being talked about here. This does not refer merely to faulty ethics in the sense of root infractions. So how many root bodhisattva vows are there? Do you know, Don, how many root vows there are in bodhisattva?
I think it's 18 and 46 secondary, I think.
Yeah.
Right. Tantra has a different number, but we're talking about the root vows of the bodhisattva. So I'm taking it here to refer to those because once they are not generally considered formulated, although they could be considered formulated once you've taken those. So it's a little bit unclear to me what he means here in the sense of the root infractions and transgressions of natural codes. So it's I don't have the Tibetan of that entire sentence there in front of me. So this does not, I'll read Jeffrey's, this does not refer merely to faulty ethics in the sense of root infractions and transgressions of natural codes. So I think that is referring to, when it says root infractions, I think that means the bodhisattva root infractions. But it signifies that he has abandoned the stains of all faulty ethics, even those which are transgressions of formulated codes. And as I think Jennifer was explaining before, one of you was explaining, formulated codes means things that are not naturally negative, but they have become negative because you have, the Buddha has said, don't do this. Okay. So
oh, sorry.
No, go on.
So that means that in dreams they can still have the 46 secondary ones, right? That's what this implies. And the second question I had was,
wait.
Okay.
Before you get to second question.
Okay.
So the secondary bodhisattva vows are still, I think, being referred to here. It doesn't mean that they would have they don't have any kind of violation of ethics. So that would include both the primary and the secondary. I'm not sure whether here what's meant by root infractions and the transgressions of natural codes. It could mean that the root infractions refers to the seven naturally negative objects, naturally negative actions of body and speech. I'm not sure. But let's go a little bit further. Suvansh, you have a question, Suvansh.
Yes, Venerable George, thank you. So, is the scope of Buddhist ethics really, does it consist of the three levels of vows, the Pratimoksha, the Bodhisattva, and the Tantric vows? Is that the scope of what we are talking about?
Okay, good question. So, would a bodhisattva, who can I ask? Nadine, would a bodhisattva on the first ground have tantric vows? Can you?
Not necessarily, because
well,
one can also
yeah, go on.
One can also progress through the paths and stages in the sutra system without tantra.
Right. Paul, what do you think? Can a second Bhumi Bodhisattva have tantric vows?
I don't see why not.
Well, there is a statement in the teachings that if you have not entered Tantra before the first Bhumi, you will not enter it until the end of the 10th Bhumi. Have you heard that?
I've never heard that before.
JC, have you heard that?
Never, no, I have not heard that.
So what this means is that if your intention is to follow the Bodhisattva path and you haven't encountered Tantra on the path, let's say, before entering the path, before you've entered the path of accumulation, if you haven't encountered it on the path of accumulation and entered the tantric path, if you haven't encountered it on the path of preparation and entered it, once you enter in the path of seeing, you will not enter into that tantric path until the 10th Bhumi, at the end of which, what happens at the end of the 10th Bhumi? Does anyone know?
You become the Buddha?
The end of the 10th Bhumi, a bodhisattva will, at the time they're nearing the Vajra-like equipoise, they will be initiated by the Buddhas and enter into the wisdom, one of the third tantric initiation, and they will achieve the clear light and achieve actually achieve enlightenment via the tantric path. So according to Tantra, it's not possible to achieve enlightenment by the bodhisattva path.
Right.
JC says, right? Paul, do you agree?
Yes, I remember. I remember hearing this. That this is something that's said in Tantra. Yeah.
Yeah. So according to Tantra, okay, you might think they're wrong or something. The bodhisattva, it's not possible to achieve enlightenment merely by the bodhisattva path. You need to achieve the third initiation and subsequently the fourth initiation. You have to have receive the consort, and by means of that, actualize the subtle clear light mind and achieve enlightenment by the tantric path. So there's another corollary of that it's not possible to enter into the tantric path once you've achieved the path of seeing. But we'll go back to that later. Subhash, you have a question.
Yes, so Venerable George, just continuing on, right? I mean, I participated in the Bodhisattva vow. There's a ceremony and you participate in it. But otherwise, you're saying somebody needs to enter the tantric path. Well, doing a sadhana, is that entry into the tantric path?
What do you think?
What defines entry into pratimoksha, or entry into the bodhisattva, or entry into
good question. Okay, so what qualifies as entry into the Mahayana path? Subhash.
My guess is taking the bodhisattva vow.
No. This is generation of spontaneous bodhicitta. Even if you take the bodhisattva vow, you haven't entered into the Mahayana path. You've entered into the Mahayana path when you've entered the path of accumulation. When do you enter the path of accumulation? When you have spontaneous bodhicitta. So it's not just based on some vow that you take, like say if you take tantric vow, you take initiation with the Dalai Lama, take Kala Chakra or something, you've entered into the tantric path. What would be an equivalent of entry into the tantric path? Say entry into the Hinayana path. What's the deciding factor? Does anyone remember? Don, do you know what the deciding factor of entering in the Hinayana path is?
Renunciation.
Spontaneous renunciation. In the same way that not just having, I must achieve liberation, I must become an arhat, but it's day and night, spontaneous. That's the entry into the Hinayana path. So what would be the equivalent to entry into the tantric path? Savansh is asking whether it's taking the tantric vow or whatever. Obviously, it's not just taking a tantric vow. Mikhail, do you have an idea? Richard?
I don't think so. I don't know.
I would say like the generation stage, right?
When you what?
When you have I don't want to say spontaneous because I'm not sure that's correct, but in any case, like when you can evoke the deity, right? Or see, in the full the body. No, that's body mandala maybe. No,
I don't know. Rachel, do you have an answer to that? I'm not. Diana probably has another question, but Rachel, do you have an answer to that?
So my guess is something about a type of ultimate clear light mind, something having to do with the clear light mind rather than you have to have the bodhicitta, the spontaneous bodhicitta, but you also need to have some level of innate clear light mind or something.
Well, what are the Paul and JC have studied these texts of Nagarjuna and Arya and Chandrakirti and the completion stage. What's the first stage of the completion stage?
Of the 5 stages?
Yeah.
Body isolation into
Yeah.
mind isolation.
By isolation of body, right? Body isolation. So perhaps one has entered into the tantric path then. Up till then, you're just dealing with imagination on the generation stage, right? Nadine, are you familiar with this terminology?
I'm sorry, I don't know.
Okay.
No.
The generation stage in Tantra is something that's done. You imagine yourself as a deity and so forth. So I'm not sure where you would say you've entered into the tantric stage exactly, but it seems to me that it would be the body isolation, the first of the, where you actually have some entry into the path where you have isolation of body. Diana, what are you thinking? What question do you have?
Sorry, Venerable George, one final clarification. When you say, like you said, on the bodhisattva, for the bodhisattva path entry, right? Spontaneous compassion, right?
Spontaneous bodhicitta.
Okay, spontaneous bodhicitta. I mean, do you mean just a mere arising of bodhicitta, or do you mean something that is consistent,
Okay, so spontaneous bodhicitta as opposed to bodhicitta with effort. Bodhicitta with effort is everything other than spontaneous bodhicitta. When you have spontaneous bodhicitta,
even for an instant?
No. If you have spontaneous bodhicitta, it remains without change, day and night, unless like Shariputra, when he was on the path of accumulation and he was tempted by a Mara to give his hand and so forth, he gave up bodhicitta. Other than that, he had spontaneous bodhicitta for some period of time, but then that was lost. But once you reach the second part of the path of accumulation, your spontaneous bodhicitta becomes immutable, and you'll never lose it. But even when you talk about spontaneous bodhicitta, that means you have it all the time, not just for an instant. Just for an instant would mean bodhicitta with effort. With great meditative effort, you develop the thought, I must achieve enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings. That may last for some period of time, but then other delusions arise and so forth, and you don't have that.
Thank you.
Okay, Diana, are you still there? Can you reach your keyboard? Your
yes,
line?
thank you. Now I have a question of what is isolation of the body, but then I had my first question, which is much smaller. The smaller question is, are ethics and morality being used essentially as synonyms here, or are they pointing to different things? And if so, how?
So in this context, there's one word. We talked about the second bhumi, the perfection of Shila, which Tibetans say sultim. So that can be translated as ethics or morality, even maybe other things. I've mentioned earlier that in the West, there may be a different connotation of ethics as being theoretical and morality as being that which you put into practice. But here, they're just different ways of translating the same thing.
Okay,
You're just talking about an actual, both theory and practice. Okay.
Isolation of the body, please. Could you say more about that?
So I've already gone probably farther than I should, but those of you who have some tantric initiations so that you can study and hear about these things, you can read about the 5 stages of the completion stage. The the first of which is called isolation of body. Sometimes they have other names in different enumerations, Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti, different systems. They call isolation of body, isolation of speech, isolation of mind, clear light, illusory body, sometimes the 5 stages of the completion stage. Anna, you have a question.
I just want to make sure I have this right, and I apologize that I'm re-asking it, but it does blow my mind. So a bodhisattva has spontaneous bodhicitta that's immutable at what bhumi? Did you say the 8th?
No, much before. To enter into the Mahayana path, the first path is the path of accumulation. That's not yet any bhumi, right? Path of accumulation is the beginning. Then when they have a unification of calm abiding and penetrative insight, realizing emptiness conceptually, they enter into the path of preparation. Then when they have a direct realization of emptiness, they enter into the path of seeing, which is the first bhumi. So at the very beginning, when they enter into the path of accumulation, they have to have actual spontaneous bodhicitta. The way what's meant by spontaneous here is not with effort, not that you have to use any effort to generate it, like we do in our we motivate at the beginning. I must achieve enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings. I'm going to listen to this teaching in order to achieve enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings. That's with effort. So maybe many of us don't even have that effortful bodhicitta. We'd have to meditate it on a long time, meditate about it on a long time, analyze about it for a long time, till we develop that bodhicitta with effort. When it becomes so ingrained that it arises spontaneously, day in and day out, that is one's main preoccupation. I must achieve enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings. That motivates one. That's called spontaneous bodhicitta. Okay. So although we talked about these things before, you can see as we go along the path, through the teachings, we go back to some of these things that we supposedly thought we understood before. We have to say, oh, yeah, becoming more clear, or maybe it's become unclear. Sean, what do you think?
I still don't understand. Did you give a reason why a bodhisattva if he has not entered the tantric path before the path of seeing, why he cannot enter that path until the 10th bhumi or the end of the 10th?
It's not like a prohibition, like you can't, Sean, you can't enter. Sorry. It's just they have, once they've reached the path of seeing, they are no longer instigated. They already know they have. Remember, in the quality of the first bhumi, one has entered into the Tathagata lineage. Remember, there was a differentiation. They not just entered the Mahayana lineage; they've entered into the Mahayana path or the Mahayana lineage. They've entered into the Tathagata lineage. They know they're going to achieve enlightenment, so their mind is not interested. Let's say for instance, the Shravakas and the Pratika Buddhas, once they have developed, once they've entered into the Hinayana path of accumulation, it's very difficult for them to, even they hear the Mahayana teachings, because they've already have this strong thought, I'm going to achieve nirvana. Shariputra, the others that listen to the Mahayana teachings from the Buddha, they listen to the Heart Sutra and other Mahayana teachings, still they didn't deviate from their Shravaka lineage. right? This similar kind of thing. So, but this is just an aside when it's talking about here. We've gone into this sideline here because what we were saying about the this does not refer merely to faulty ethics in the sense of root infractions and transgressions of natural codes, but signifies that he has abandoned the stains of all faulty ethics, even those which are transgressions of formulated codes. So I was trying to raise the question, maybe root infractions here means the bodhisattva root infractions. It wouldn't be the tantric root infractions, because the bodhisattva on the second ground would not, if he's actually on the bodhisattva path and not on the tantric path, they wouldn't have encountered the tantric infractions at that point. Anyway, there's a subtle esoteric point. Shankar, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I'm glad you brought this up about the bodhisattva entering or not entering the tantric path, in the path of seeing and the 10th bhumi and so on. Because recently, a couple of weeks ago, actually, Geshe Zopa, one of his teachings, actually, and it made me think about this. He said, I guess he was probably calling for a tantric point of view. He said, you cannot get enlightened without tantra. So I guess he was talking about it from a tantric point of view, but I was thinking like, that's not what I heard, right? So that just makes sense now.
From the tantric, when you read the tantras, the Buddhist tantras, from the tantric point of view, even if you're a bodhisattva, well, first of all, how long do you spend on the path of accumulation and path of preparation? Does anyone know? A couple of years?
No. Well,
John?
I think it's something with about 67 zeros after it.
Well, yeah, it's a countless great eon.
Countless great eon.
Path of seeing and the impure bhumis, you spend another countless great eon. On the path of on the pure bhumis, the 8th, 9th, and 10th, another countless great eon. So countless great eon is the 67 zeros, okay? That many countless is not meaning like unfathomable, it's just a number with a certain number of zeros after it. That many great eons. Great eon is a period of time for a universe to come into existence and to go out of existence. So that's unimaginable. So if you haven't encountered tantra on the path of accumulation and the path of preparation, which has taken you a countless great eons, you get this incredible, and you realize emptiness directly on the path of seeing. You're no longer going to be tempted to dabble in tantra. That's kind of the point.
Okay. The other thing I was going to say is that it's interesting you talk about Shila as ethics and morality, because and maybe that's a Buddhist definition, I don't know, but in general in Sanskrit, Shila also means virtue, right? Which is somewhat slightly different from ethics and morality.
Yeah. So here, ethics is being pure, right? Let's continue a little bit.
Anyway,
Here, Shila is talking about having this particular quality. So let's continue along. So this includes not just the immorality of root infractions and naturally reprehensible deeds. He or she also relinquishes the stains of immorality of violating rule-based precepts. Okay, so the text continues, because they do not inflame the afflictions that give rise to immorality. Chimpa says inflame. That's not, I'm not sure where he gets that idea. Hopkins says, having proper ethics or Shila means that one does not assume afflictions that means take up afflictions, which motivate faulty ethics, and that sinful actions discordant with formulated codes do not arise. So the Tibetan says, and neither translator translates that Tibetan word dangdu. Do you know what dangdu means, Paul?
I'm sorry, George, can you spell that? I don't have the Tibetan in front of me.
Like dang, da nga dang, do, like dang, like in and, but dangdu.
Dangdu, dangdu.
Dangdu means voluntarily.
Oh,
okay. Yeah.
Right. So they neither of them have translated that. Here they both say one does not. I would say Jeffrey should say having proper ethics means that one does not voluntarily assume afflictions which motivate faulty ethics. That means one doesn't take up the afflictions that motivate faulty ethics, and that sinful actions discordant with formulated codes do not arise. Or as Jimpa says, he does not inflame the afflictions. I'm not sure why he says inflame. That lempa means to take up afflictions, to assume them, that give rise to immorality. And because the non-virtuous karma of transgressing prescribed rules does not occur for them, he has attained the coolness born of having extinguished the fires of remorse from accruing the downfalls of violating prescribed rules. Wow. Lots of, sounds so dense. What does that mean? It means that this bodhisattva on the second ground does not bring up, does not take on, you can say voluntarily, afflictions which will motivate, or as Jimpa says, which give rise to immorality, or Hopkins says, one does not assume afflictions which motivate faulty ethics. Motivation, from our motivations at the beginning of the class. Motivation means having a thought to do something. So having there are certain afflictions which will motivate you to violate morality, right? Like strong attachment, strong hatred can motivate you to violate morality. You forget about the morality at that time. You're so angry with someone, you kill them, or you want so much the money that you steal it, because there's so much attachment and so forth. So this means one does not assume afflictions which motivate faulty ethics. That part. The word that both authors leave out is voluntarily, dangdu. So that means that they could have some kind of subtle arisal of, some kind of afflictions, but they don't do that voluntarily. William, you have a thought or question, comment?
I wonder when it says formulated codes, could that mean the Vinaya as well?
Yes. Yeah. Formulated codes means things that are not Rangshenge Kanamatawa, which are not naturally negative, not naturally reprehensible. That means it's not naturally negative karma. Say
like killing your parents. Killing your parents would be a natural thing that you should not do. I mean,
right.
You don't have to write that down. That would be everybody would agree that killing your parents was not.
Right. It's not so much in terms of whether requires agreement of the population, we're going to debate it in Congress whether the law of gravity is going to be revoked or not, or something. It doesn't depend on, it's a natural law. If you kill, you have to have the thought of, if you commit the negative action of killing, you have to have the thought of severing the other being's life. It may not arise to you as I'm going to, when you go fishing, you're not necessarily thinking that. You may go fishing and then, what's it called when you throw the fish back still alive?
Catch and release.
Catch and release, maybe you don't mean to kill it, but if you mean to eat it, you had to have the thought, that you're going to kill it. And that thought itself is naturally negative. It creates the karma to, possibly be born in hell or as a hungry ghost or as an animal, depending on its severity and other mitigating factors, right?
Thank you.
Okay. So because they do not inflame the afflictions or do not assume the afflictions, they don't take up the afflictions that give rise to immorality. They don't let that enter into their mind. And because the non-virtuous karma of transgressing the prescribed rules, because the non-virtuous karma of transgressing the prescribed rules does not occur for them, they have attained the coolness born of having extinguished the fires of remorse from accruing the downfalls of violating prescribed rules. So it's too dense. Jeffrey sort of breaks it up into two sentences here. Thereby, one has extinguished the fire of contrition. Jimpa translates remorse. So what is that? What's another word for contrition or remorse?
Regret.
Regret, right? So if you break vows, or if you do something bad, say it wasn't just a vow, you killed someone or you stole something, later, when you recognize that, you can have contrition or remorse or regret. It's all the same thing. There's just different ways of translating it, right? You can feel, oh man, I shouldn't have done that. Have you ever felt that way? Or maybe you didn't feel it right away. It wasn't until years later you thought, oh, why did I yell at my mother? Why didn't I realize my parents were trying to help me? Why did I do this or that? It can come up much later, right? So that is like a fire when you have that kind of regret or remorse or contrition. It's something that causes you to feel very bad, right? If you regret having done something good, what does that do? Say you created some virtuous karma. Jennifer, if you created some virtuous karma and you feel regret, what does that do?
That also weakens the virtue or destroys the virtue.
In fact, that's usually when we talk about confession, that's likened to a fire that burns up the negative, the virtuous karma that you've created. And so generally regret or remorse or contrition is likened to a fire. So Jeffrey translates, thereby one has extinguished the fire of contrition for the arising of infractions discordant with the formulated codes, and has thus attained a coolness. Jipper says, one has attained coolness born of having extinguished the fires of remorse from accruing downfalls of violating prescribed rules. So what's this talking about? It's talking about the word shila. Shila, etymologically, there are different kinds of etymologies of it. In the next sentence, Jimpa says, Jimpa's translation says, the Sanskrit term for morality is shila, which is composed of the words shita, referring to coolness. So if you look in a Sanskrit dictionary, you'll see the word shita usually means cold or coolness. And lati, both Jimpa and, oh no, so Jimpa has just lati without a long A, but Jeffrey's translation has it correctly with a long A, long A, T-I, which means attained, if you look in the Sanskrit dictionary. Lati without the long A doesn't mean to attain. So the word shila is like to have achieved, etymologically can be said to if you're keeping shila, you have attained coolness. That means you've cooled the fires of remorse from having done negative things, right? Alternatively, it is called morality, shila, because of being the cause of happiness. It is something that is sought after by the sublime ones. The word that he says sought after is actually the word tempa, which, like when we say Lama la tempa. Does anyone know the Tibetan? When we say Lama la tempa, what does that mean?
Relying on the teacher.
Relying on guru, or sometimes we say guru devotion, right? Lama la tempa. Tempa means reliance on the guru. So it's not. It doesn't mean sought after. It means relying on. It is something that is relied on by the sublime ones. It's something that the higher beings rely on morality. They abide by it. Okay. These are explanations of the word shila based on its etymology. So just etymological meanings. How are we doing? Making sense? Nadine, how are you doing? You're in the dark there already. The sun is set in Berlin.
Yes, I'm with my parents here on countryside. And there's no electricity here, but it's enough for the computer.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I will listen to it again. It's quite difficult today.
Yeah. Yeah. It's difficult for me too, so don't worry. So let's go a little bit further. With regard to its actual nature, so we're talking about the second bhumi where there's a special practice of morality or shila. With regard to its actual nature, morality is defined in terms of the 7 relinquishments, 7 abandonings, you could say, the abandoning of the 7 negative actions of body and speech. I thought there were 10 negative actions. Don, aren't there 10 negative actions? It says 7.
I think these 7 are referring to the naturally apprehensible ones.
Oh, no.
Naturally
Even
repulsive.
covetousness, malice, and wrong view are also naturally negative, naturally kanamatue, wrong shingi kanamatue.
Why do they sometimes refer to these 7 as the naturally wrong ones? Then I hear that.
Well, say for instance, if we take pratimoksha vows, do the pratimoksha vows that you take, do they include negative actions of mind? William, do you know about pratimoksha?
I would think so. Body, speech, and mind. Yeah, I would think so.
Now, the pratimoksha vows only are prohibitions of actions of body and speech. We talked about this in Low-Rig and some of our other courses before. Does anyone remember? KT, have you ever heard this before? Maybe KT is preparing Easter dinner or something.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh,
There you
great. I'm on the road, but
Yeah.
Pratimoksha vows are there the 5 vows of do not kill, steal, lie, sexual misconduct, and drinking alcohol? I believe. Are those the 5? Or am I confused?
Stealing, sexual misconduct, lying.
Speech for lying and alcoholic or intoxicating.
Yeah, those are the 5 lay precepts, but in general, Pratimoksha vows of a monk or nun, which become more extensive, only prohibit negative actions of body and speech. In the Abhidharma, it's explained that there's a reason for that. They say that taking a vow creates something which is likened to form. It's I can't remember the Tibetan name, non-apprehensible form. What's the Tibetan, Paul? Do you know?
I forget.
So it's you can find in the explanations in Jeffrey Hopkins' Meditation on Emptiness. So it's a non-revelatory. That's how Jeffrey translates it. Non-revelatory form. That means it's by making a strong vow not to do something, you create a kind of form that other ordinary people can't see, but Arya beings and certain other beings can see that form. Form itself, like say, for instance, if you have a river and you dam it up, the dam can cause the river to stop, right? Cause the flow to stop. Or you put a wall up, maybe unless it goes over the wall, So it's said that this non-revelatory form, taking a vow, can only obstruct actions which are themselves form, like the river. So it can only obstruct actions of body and speech. So generally in the Pratimoksha vows, there are only prohibitions against actions of body and speech. Bodhisattva vows also include actions of mind, and tantric vows also include actions of mind. So you need to have a greater kind of vigilance of the mind to prevent them. Mental activities can rise even if you've taken a vow not to do something. They can arise very easily. They're not stopped by that non-revelatory form. Okay, let's continue a little bit. So, with regard to its actual nature, morality is defined in terms of the 7 relinquishments, the abandoning of the 7 immoral acts of body and speech. The underlying states of mind that give rise to these 7 relinquishments or as Jeffrey says, therefore, in terms of its entities as well as its motivators, proper ethics is comprised of the 10 abandonments, the paths of wholesome actions, abandoning the 10 paths of non-virtue. So the underlying states of mind that give rise to these 7 relinquishments are non-attachment, which is the absence of covetousness. Is that right? Is it just the absence of covetousness? Nadine, do you remember from Low-Rig? What is non-attachment? Is non-attachment simply the absence of covetousness?
I thought the absence of attachment.
Non-attachment. What is the mental factor non-attachment? Don, do you remember? You're smiling.
No, I was just smiling at the definition of non-attachment is not having attachment.
No, that's not the definition of non-attachment. Who knows the definition of non-attachment? Chakpa meba. Of the virtuous mental, it's one of the virtuous mental factors, right? Shanka, you know?
I'm sorry, no, I don't.
Oh boy. Okay. So non-attachment is not simply the lack of attachment, it's the antidote to attachment. It's a positive state of mind. It's not just like for instance, right now, I don't have attachment for sushi or ice cream. That's not non-attachment. Non-attachment is a mental factor, a positive, virtuous mental factor, which is the antidote to attachment. So here, non-attachment, he says, is the absence of covetousness. How does Jeffrey translate this here? Okay. Jeffrey translates, from the viewpoint of its entity, proper ethics has the character of 7 abandonments, abandoning the 7 faulty modes of body and speech, that is, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct. Those are 3 paths of body. Lying, divisive talk, harsh speech, and senseless chatter. How else do we translate them? Lying, what's the word they say, divisive speech, slander, harsh speech, and senseless chatter. Those are called the 7, what's it called? Modes of body and speech, faulty modes of body and speech. The motivators of the 7 abandonments are non-covetousness, which is non-desire, non-harmfulness, which is non-hatred, and right view, which is freedom from wrong views. So Jeffrey doesn't go into elaboration there, but in all those cases, when it's saying non, or he says non-attachment, it doesn't mean merely the lack of attachment. Non-attachment is the actual antidote to attachment. So for instance, if you meditate in your mind, where else are you going to meditate? If you meditate on the fact that the objects of your desire, the objects of your attachment are impermanent, that they are impure, that they are selfless, and that they have parts, you can develop an antidote to attachment. That antidote to attachment is called non-attachment. It's not just the lack of attachment. Making sense? Nadine, are you remembering from Low Rig now?
Yes, I'm so sorry that I did not read.
No, that's okay. I'm saying, if you go back to your Low Rig texts, if you still have, hopefully you haven't erased them from your hard drive, you can see the definition of non-attachment, non-hatred, and non-ignorance. They're all positive states of mind. They're just not, it's not simply the absence. Mikhail.
Yeah, just to be sure, so what you just said about non-attachment is also true for non-aversion and right view. They are antidotes to aversion and ignorance.
You meant wrong view, right? So, how do we say here? The motivators of the 7 abandonments are non-covetousness, which is non-desire. That means non-attachment. Non-attachment is the antidote to attachment. Okay, so when you talk about the 3 negative states of mind, when we talk about if you talk about the 10 non-virtuous actions, right? You have 7 of body and speech, 3 of body, 4 of speech. We just talked about. and you also have 3 of mind. Covetousness, which is like an extreme form of attachment. Malice is an extreme form of hatred. In both those cases, you come to the conclusion, I must have what I'm desiring. That becomes covetousness. You know, your attachment desires something. When you come to the conclusion, I'm going to get it one way or the other, that is called covetousness. You know, you covet your neighbor's wife or whatever, your neighbor's husband. Malice is an extreme form of hatred. I will get even with them. Like these pictures of some politician putting his finger like this, you know who I'm talking about. You know, malice. I'm going to get them one way or the other. And wrong view. What is wrong view? It's the what counters wrong view is correct view, right? So right view is the freedom from wrong views. Okay, so you have to understand that in order to understand what's being talked about here. The underlying states of mind that give rise to these 7 relinquishments are non-attachment, which is which is non-covetousness. That means it's an antidote to covetousness. Non-aversion, which is not just the absence of harmful intent, it's the antidote to harmful intent. And right view, which opposes, there you go, opposes, is antidote to wrong view. By including these motivating factors, morality refers to the 10 abandonments or the 10 relinquishments, which are 10 positive courses of action that overcome the 10 negative courses of action, or we generally say the 10 paths of action that overcome the 10 positive paths of action that overcome the 10 negative paths of action. Making sense? Suvash, you're thinking. You look like a statue or something. What were you thinking? Processing? Okay, processing. Okay. Don, how are you doing?
Well, I'm still thinking in terms of the 10 non-virtues, the last ones being views as opposed to the actions. So those still can be natural negatives?
Definitely, yeah. So when you're saying views, it means wrong view, not just views in general. When you're thinking about views, so we say covetousness, malice, wrong view of the 3 of mind, right? So those are not included in the pratimoksha vows, but they are included because they're not form, they're mental, right? Only the prohibitions against negative actions of body and speech, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, divisive speech, abusive speech, and idle gossip. Only those are included in the pratimoksha vows. Sean, what do you think?
I just wanted to get clarity on this list where they list divisive talk. Like, what do they mean by that? Because it seems like these days everything is divisive, even if you're speaking truth. So,
okay.
Or an example that came to mind was like the Dalai Lama recognizing this Mongolian Lama is like divisive to China, but it's true, or he's like doing something positive.
Okay, say for instance, you're attracted, or you're married, but say when you were a boy, when you were unmarried, you were a bachelor, and you had attraction, you were attracted to some girl, and there was another suitor coming toward her, and you were to mention to her or one of her friends, oh, that guy, you have to be careful of that guy. He's maybe, talking bad, I can't remember the slang for that, giving some bad input. with the intention of separating them, of dividing them, that's called divisive speech. If your intention is to cause a division, that's called divisive speech. So
couldn't you cause a division though?
yeah. But so if
And
you're
yet
causing a
you're correct.
division without intending to divide, that's not, you don't have a negative motivation, right?
Well, for example, in your example, like if the suitor was cheating on the girl and you like the girl, like your intention is to protect the girl, not necessarily that she's going
Right.
to
So
do
that wouldn't be divisive speech if your intention is to protect someone. But if your intention is, to benefit yourself, let's say of the 4 actions of speech, negative actions of speech, which is heaviest and which is lightest? Shankar.
It's
talking to me?
idle chatter. Well, okay, it accumulates the most. I mean, it's heaviest. But heaviest would be
Idle
lying.
gossip. Idle gossip is, in one sense, because we accumulate so much, it can become heavy.
Right.
But by its nature, which is heaviest?
Oh, lying, I guess.
Malice.
Divisive speech.
Divisive speech. So lying. Okay. Oh, divisive speech. Yes, of course. Yeah.
So what is the particular divisive speech that's so negative, Paul?
Would that be creating a schism in the Sangha?
Right. So if, like Devadatta, wanting to become, the head honcho, saying the Buddha's got it wrong, you monks, talking to the group of monks, the Buddha, Shakyamuni got it wrong, you should follow me, causing division in the Sangha, that's one of the 5 actions of immediate retribution, right? So usually when you talk about the negative actions of speech, divisive speech can be the most heavy, especially if it's dividing, say, a guru from their disciples, or causing a division in the Sangha, in the spiritual community, and so forth. Mary Ellen, what are you thinking?
I was just wondering if divisive speech, it only applies if there is a connection that you're severing. It's not preventing a connection that hasn't happened yet.
Well, if you could, if you were to, what's a bad talk? I can't remember what they say. Bad speaking bad about people, in order to cause you not to get interested in them, even if you're not interested yet, that's still divisive speech. You're causing them to not be together.
Okay, thanks.
I'm going to get Jennifer first before you, Shankar, because she has a question. Yeah.
All right, quick one. I thought, aside from the power of the object, in terms of heaviest, lying was more heavy than divisive speech. Is that right?
Not generally. Lying, when they put them in that order. So when we say lying, what's the order what do we usually say? What's the usual order?
I've heard lying,
divisive speech, harsh speech, and so lying, just in general, if you're keeping, boyfriend and girlfriend, or some suitor away from your boyfriend, dividing them that way, that might not be as bad as lying, but divisive speech has the potential of being far greater than any other negative action of speech, because it includes division of the Sangha, which is one of the actions of immediate retribution. Okay.
Thank you.
And Shankar?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about this, but this divisive schism in the Sangha thing kind of reminded me. So as we all know, there was a schism in the Sangha in the 80s, right? So So all those, so, you know, and you talked about the immediate retribution, which is of course one of, you know, divisive speech is one of those, or causing schism in the Sangha is one of those. So does that mean that all the people who followed, let's say the, you know, the other Sangha, you know, the Lama, are they also contributing to the division in the Sangha, and are they also like subject to immediate retribution?
So does anyone know the action of immediate retribution of causing schism in the Sangha? Can that happen now?
No, not necessarily.
Paul, what do you say?
Yeah, not necessarily.
It can't happen now. It's defined as only taking place when the Buddha is alive and the Sangha is unified, and such as Devadatta causing a schism at that time. So even though something now, say, causing a division between a teacher and their disciples, or a division amongst Buddhists, you know, if some person says, you know, that's with intention of getting you to follow them, saying the other teachers are wrong or something like that. Not simply, say, for instance, if you point out another teaching is erroneous for logical reasons, not in order to cause the disciples to follow you, that's not called divisive speech. And that's not schism of the Sangha. That's not as heavy. Although these are not, although the objects, the actions of immediate retribution can only take place when the Buddha is alive, the similitudes of them are still super heavy. Killing your mother, your father, and so forth are still heavy, but they're not necessarily actions of immediate retribution. Okay.
Wait,
okay.
Oh,
Yeah,
are you saying that killing your parents, immediate retribution, was only when the Buddha was alive?
Well, what do you think?
I would think it would be always. I mean,
Rachel,
maybe,
what do you think? You're good.
Well, you just said the similitudes are still heavy now, even though that one is not possible. You can't have the heaviest karma of the schism in the Sangha because the Buddha is not alive and the division in the Sangha can't happen.
Right. So I'm not sure about the others, killing mother and father. I don't know if you do that now, if that is an action of immediate retribution. Probably it could be, but certainly schism. I'll have to go back and look in the text. Certainly schism. Let's say for instance, which of the other ones? Drawing blood from the Tathagata, can that take place now? No, the Tathagata is not alive, right? So that can only take place when the Buddha is alive. So of them, some of them are definitely only actions of immediate retribution when the Buddha is alive, causing schism, drawing blood from the Sangha, drawing blood from the Tathagata. But the others, I'm not sure if they have the same, if there are still actions of immediate retribution now, that you will go to hell, what is like in Monopoly, right? Go to jail, do not pass go directly to jail, or something like that. I'm not sure if they are, that you will go to hell immediately without any other life intervening if you kill your mother and father. Now, it's said that at the time of the Buddha, that was the case, but it may not be, it may be, in fact, it couldn't be purified, right? According to the Hinayana, it couldn't be purified. But it's said that even was a Jatashatru who killed his father, right? You know who Jatashatru was, right? The prince, what was his father? Bimbisara, I think. He killed his father, so that was an action of immediate retribution. He also tried to draw, he actually drew blood from the Tathagata, right? He tried to kill the Buddha, and by having boulders roll down on him, and instead of killing him, it just drew some blood from the Tathagata. So he committed several of these actions, and even though he had incredible remorse, he was still born in hell afterwards for a short instant, because he became a disciple of the Buddha afterwards, developed remorse, but he still was born in hell. But I'm not sure if that still is the case now.
What about in the case of self-defense? What if your father's trying to kill you?
Yeah. What about that? I won't ask you if you have some personal experience.
Your father is not going to go to hell, because killing your child is not immediate retribution.
Well, killing, the action of killing can lead to rebirth in hell, right? You can say you definitely will go to hell sometime unless he purifies that. And we're talking about actions of immediate retribution. Okay, enough. We've gone over. We've gone slowly today because apparently a lot of these things that you've studied before, you've forgotten. And like what non-attachment means is actual antidote to attachment, is not just the absence of attachment. What the pratimoksha vows are only actions of body and speech, and many things like this. We spent a lot of time going over this, but I think that's important that you revivify your memory, go back and study about those things. So we are going to, I'm sorry, I missed that. What did Mary Ellen just say there? I missed that. How can I see that again? She said something about.
In action.
I see. I have to use. I'm trying to put my finger on the screen, but what did Mary Ellen say? An action of self-defense may not be a complete karma. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Mary Ellen. So let's say these dedication prayers. Mary Ellen will put up, hopefully. So we have, you go down a little to the dedication prayer. So as you remember, we tried to motivate to create bodhicitta with effort at the beginning, not effortless bodhicitta, right? Unless one of you is actually a bodhisattva and has spontaneous bodhicitta. But even with that effortful bodhicitta, we created the impetus that this entire session became incredibly virtuous. Now we're going to dedicate these virtues. Due to these virtues, Gewadi, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead every migrator without exception into that enlightened state. So you think that, these virtues I've created, making a strong wish that they ripen in my quick assumption, quick achievement of enlightenment, so that I can effortlessly, spontaneously, and without error lead sentient beings, lead migrating beings into that very same state. May the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase evermore. And long life prayers for Lama Zopa Rinpoche, you who uphold the Muni's moral code, serving as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, masterfully accomplishing magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels. You who are the savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. And to all our gurus, you who are my eyes for viewing all the infinite scriptures, you allow me to see them and understand them. You are the supreme gateway for fortunate ones traveling to liberation, engaging with skillful means, moved by mercy, moved by love, Sewe here, all illuminating spiritual friends, please, please live a long and stable life. So thank you for your endurance. Hope to see you next week. We'll have discussion group on Monday. JC's still there. JC, hope to see you on Monday, if you could make it. You said you were going to be were you there last Monday?
No, I wasn't able to make it last
Okay,
Monday,
okay. You said, yeah, I thought you said you were, okay.
Yeah, I had hoped to, but
Okay. So one of the things I'd like to do soon is to talk about the personalities that the five ascetics who were the first 5 disciples of the Buddha, and the 10 principal Shravakas, Shariputra and so forth. Maybe I'll see if one of the centers wants to have a course. Otherwise, in discussion group over the weeks, we'll mention some of those. And I have some documents. So hope to see you soon. Take care.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Read ahead. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Thank you, Venerable
Thank you,
George.
Miriam.
Thank you.